welcome back to another video. This is just going to be a short video describing the rule set. It's a trap that me and my wife have developed that's currently in playtesting with a bunch of people that we have that we know from conventions. And, I just uploaded a battle report the other day, and I thought, you know what, maybe I didn't explain as much in that battle report as I should have about the rule set for those that are interested. Now, if you're not interested, this video may not be a whole lot of use to you, but we designed a set of rules just for fast play. We want stuff to die quickly. We want the game to be over in an hour and a half, 2 hours at most, and we want it to be fun, thematic, and scalable. Now, I 3D printed all these ships. I've got primer on my hands, so instead of looking at my hands, I'm going to use my little Blucher measuring stick. But I 3D printed all these, and a lot of people, I understand, they don't have access to a 3D printer, or even if they have access, they don't really want the health issues that could be part of it. For me, those aren't really a problem for me. I'm not too worried. I'm safe as much as I can be. So I 3D print a lot of my stuff, not because I don't want to buy stuff from Shapeways or whatever, but just because it's, you got a kid, you got a house, a car, family, you don't really want to spend a ton of money on certain projects. So I 3D print these, saves me a bucket of money. A ship this size here, like the Star Destroyer on Shapeways, will be about, $35, and I have 4 of them 3D printed, so, and not to mention all the other ships. So I've saved a few $100s on that. But anyway, you don't have to have this size ship. Like, look at my hand compared to some of these ships. Like, they're fairly small. You don't have to have these exact ships. The bases don't mean anything. The bases are just there for support so that the models don't fall or tip over. So you can see the Star Destroyers on a massive base, and then you have the little frigates and stuff on smaller bases and medium bases. The base size means nothing. So if you have like the old WizKids Star Wars Spaceship Battles game, whatever you want, it all works out. The only thing that you need is this sheet here, which has all the stats, for instance, the name of the ship, the scale of the ship, meaning how big it is, the movement ratio, how many times it can turn, and what the turn ratio or angle would be. And then you have the firepower arcs, so the amount of dice you roll out of each arc of the ship, the shield save, the armor that you need to get below, and how many hull points the ship has. And then you have point defense for fighters. You have fighter cap and bomber cap for figuring out your squadrons, which I did on a previous video. Maybe go back and watch that. I described how you generate your fighters and bombers for these battles. But the game is really about starships. Sorry, my kid was sick all last week, and I'm sick all this week, so I'm going to try and get through this video without hacking up a lung here. But yeah, so here I just have set out a bunch of Rebel ships and a bunch of Imperial ships, and I just wanted to go through a few of the mechanics in a little bit more detail prior than, other than just watching that battle report and maybe kind of figuring out what the heck we were doing. I mean, I see a lot of people who design their own set of rules, like their house rules or whatever, and they're playing battle reports, and although it looks really cool, I really have no idea what's happening or why that is happening. So for the next few minutes, I'm just going to take a few, maybe a turn or two of a ship here and there, just to show you what's going on. Now, the first thing that you're going to do is, in any game, is you're going to figure out how you activate. Like, what is the activation mechanic? Well, for us, we have a bunch of games that we like that have really cool activation mechanics, and then there's a few that we hate. The ones that we hate are usually 40k. I hate the whole idea of one side goes first, moves all their ships, does all their stuff, and then the second side goes first. On a scale, like a 28 mil scale, like 40k, that could really mean that on the first turn, just by the look of the dice, like, you don't roll high enough, and 1 or 2 of your units is destroyed instantly without even having to activate. And that really bothers me. Now, on this scale of game, that probably won't happen because in the first turn, very little firing will happen. Very few things are in range. Now, but if you are scaling the game with bigger ships, bigger things, then yeah, that might happen. Who has a big enough table? So how we like to activate is alternate activations. You move this, the rebel move this ship if he wins, the Imperials move that ship, then it goes back to the rebels, and you go back and forth until everyone is activated. Alternatively, we also found that for every ship that you have in your fleet, they're assigned a little token. Now, I'm using tokens from Star Wars Armada, so don't, if you have that game, this works out great. Now, for every ship in your fleet, they get assigned an activation token. And what you can do is you can do the bolt action method, or the Too Fat Lardies method, and just chuck them into a bag. And who goes first? This guy. Now, for these tokens here from Armada, that may not work very well because they're two-sided. So we just use the alternate activation mode. But there's nothing stopping you from using the cards, like the Too Fat Lardies, Chain of Command or Sharp's Practice. Nothing stopping you. It doesn't affect the game in almost any way. It just means who goes first, who goes second, and you're not going to get to move your entire fleet like in 40k. Okay, that's activation. Then we go to the movement phase. Now I'm going to pause the video and take some of these ships out of here, and I'm just going to show you some movements and some turning. Okay, there's a bad edit right there. But this is what I've selected for the Rebels and the Imperials, just to show off movement and the turning angles. Now for the Rebels, I've chosen one of their larger ships, which is MC-75 right here, or not, MC-80 Liberty. I got a Rebel Mark 1 assault frigate, we got a Neutron bulk cruiser, and the CR-90, which probably everyone will recognize. And on this side, we got probably the less recognizable, but still very Imperial strike cruiser. We got the tiny, what is that? That is the Tartan class patrol cutter. And then we got the honking Imperial 1 Star Destroyer. Now, in the game, depending on who goes first, so let's say it's the Rebels that go first, they get to choose a ship, obviously, like we just discussed. They get to choose a ship. Now, most ships have a vastly different speed ratio. So, for instance, the small ships will be much more agile. So, for instance, in this game, now, when you're scaling your own game, if you're scaling it, you might want to rework out the distances. Like, if you're doing it a smaller scale than this, you might want to do centimeters. If you're doing a larger scale than this, you might want to do, double the amount of inches. Whatever, you guys can figure that out on your own. But for this game, we work in inches, and each ship can go a different amount. So, for instance, the Corellian Corvette is basically half the ship is engines, so it can really book it. It can go 14 inches. So, if you want to just show that on the map, I'll show you here. It can go. Really, if I do it this way here, it can cover the entire angle of the camera here. Now, the the Neutron bulk cruiser, it can only go 7 inches because it's not quite as big. But it has a lot of engines, but it's slow. It's old technology, so it goes around 7 inches. The MC-80 or the Liberty, it also goes 7 inches, but although it's bigger and it can go the same speed as the Neutron, that just tells you that the Mon Calamari have better engines, so they're able to keep up with the aging bulk cruiser. Now, the Rebel assault frigate, it can go, if I can mark here, it can go 8 inches. So the Rebels have just strapped on a bunch of engines onto the ship, and it's able to book it. The strike cruiser can also go to 8 inches, and the Victory Star Destroyer, or not the Victory, the Imperial Star Destroyer, it can go, just looking at my stats here, I've forgotten it already, it can go 5 inches. So, it's not very fast in this game. Now, what that will do is it'll give the Rebel player, if you want to take a bunch of Corvettes, it'll give you a distinct advantage on getting around and past and now skirting around to the rear of Imperial ships. But it also benefits the Imperial player to have slow ships because Star Destroyers have most of their firepower in their forward arc. So they're slowly going to trudge up the board and blast things, whereas the Rebels are going to go around the flanks and, they're not going to stand toe-to-toe to Star Destroyer. They're going to want to get around to its side or its rear arc. Now, that's movement. Very simple. Turning radius depends on the type of ship. So, smaller ships, much more agile. Now, there is smaller ships than this. The Tartan, for instance, is one of them. The Tartan cruiser gets, if I look here at my stats, he gets 2 90-degree turns. So, the way we work it in the rules is if you're going full speed, you get to make both those turns. If you're going less than half speed, those turns are halved, so you only get to make one of those turns. And if you're stopped, you don't get to make any turns. So you're basically stopped and you're looking forward or whatever, and you're not going to move. But a tartan cruiser, for instance, he can just come in and he can just start his turn by turning 90 degrees and just taking off. Or he can, he can turn 90 degrees, move up the board half, turn 90 degrees, and move the rest of his way. So they're pretty agile. Other ships, like for instance, this Corellian Corvette, they don't have 2 90-degree turns. They have 3 45-degree turns. So if they're going their full 14 inches, they'll turn, they can move, turn, and move. So they can go like, although it would be nice to have 90-degree turns, they're just booking it around, and they can do zigzags in and around asteroid fields. So that's why that is. And for larger ships, you just move, and they only have one turn, a 45-degree turn once. Now, they can use that turn at the beginning of their turn or at the end of their turn, but they have to use it either or. They can't move forward, if they have a 7-inch move, they can't move forward 3.5 inches, turn, and go 3.5 inches. They can go at the beginning or the end. Star Destroyers, they're a little bit less maneuverable. They can only make their one 45-degree turn at the end of their movement. So whereas the Mon Calamari get to choose beginning or end, the Rebels have to move forward their distance, more than half, and then they get to move their turn. So they're very cumbersome to turn, but I think that makes a lot of sense. The Mon Cal ships, although they're big, they're a little bit more maneuverable than the big honking Star Destroyer. And the same is true with some older cruisers. Like this bulk cruiser here, he's 145-degree turn. He's not that maneuverable, so he can only make his turn at the end as well, like the Star Destroyer. And that's just because he's an older ship. But you can change these rules all you want. It's just a template for what to use. Plus, when the game is in, while it's in playtesting with several people, I'm sure several of these things are going to change. So this is just an idea of what happens. So what you do is you just choose, let's say I'm going to choose my Mon Cal cruiser. They're going to activate, so you just put your activation token on him to show that he's been used. I'm going to turn, move up, and I'm going to stay here. And then I get to shoot. I get to do any attacks. Now, if I just move this here, what I'll do is I'll go like this. So here we have the Rebel cruiser in between an Imperial Star Destroyer and an Imperial Strike Cruiser. Now in the game, if I can just zoom in here, you can see the Liberty cruisers right here. 6 inches makes a 45-degree turn. Now it has several arcs. It has 5, 3, and 3. So that means they can shoot 5 out of its front arc and 3 out of each of its side arcs. And you can shoot out of more than one arc at a time. But for every arc past the first arc that you're going to fire from is a -1 to hit, or a +1 to hit, I guess you want to say. It's harder to hit. So in this case, I can shoot the Imperial player with 3 dice, so I can shoot 3 dice, let's put here, at the Star Destroyer. And I can shoot 5 dice at the Strike Cruiser. Now, if I decide that the Imperial player is going to be, the Imperial Star Destroyer is going to be the main target, they're going to be hitting on 3s plus or minus some modifiers. If I decide that the Strike Cruiser is going to be the secondary target, they're going to be hitting on 4s. And you can do that kind of stuff. So we'll just say we're going to have the Star Destroyer is going to be the first. So there's only 1 hit on the Star Destroyer. And then we're going to roll the 5 dice for the Strike Cruiser. And there's only 1 hit for the Strike Cruiser. Then the defending player gets to save based on the shield value. And Imperial shields, although they do have them, they're very poorly placed, so they're not the best shields. Mon Calamari cruisers have redundant shields, they're far better. So let's see if he rolled a 5. So he rolled a 5, so he saved, and the Imperial Star Destroyer rolled a 2, so he didn't save. So this attack on the front arc is gone. The Imperial player defended it, it's finished. Now what we look at is we go to the Imperial Star Destroyer, number 1, and we go to the armor value, which is a 4+, or a 4. Now, this doesn't mean that you get to roll a 4 or higher. This means you roll a 4 or lower to do damage. So with this one successful attack that went through the shields, you're going to roll. I got a 5, which means I didn't damage. But let's just say I rolled a 2, which means it went through. That would mean that the Imperial player, if we go back to the thing here, Imperial player, hull value, hull is 10. So he started off with 10 hull points, and now he's down to 9. And we just mark that. Normally we mark that with white dice or some other way. So here we have the 6 and the 3, just to tell us, to remind us later in the game that he has 9 hull points left. Now, if at any point he gets below half, so 4, not 5, 4, below half, or sorry, well, we'll guess half or below, you'll put a red dice there, just to show and remind you that he's now critical. All of his movements and turns and stuff are on attacks are all halved. But he's not. He's at 9. Let's just say that attack went through and he's at 9 hull points. Now it's the Imperial player's turn. Now the Imperial player has 2 options. Instead of the Rebel player had two attacks, but they weren't options. He could shoot both of them. The Imperial player now has options. He can either, because the Star Destroyer's guns are on the side and mainly pointing forward, he can now either decide to shoot either the Liberty Star Cruiser or the Rebel ship here, the Neutron Bulk Cruiser, to his flank. He can't shoot both. And the way I designate that in the rule set here is, if you look at Imperial Star Destroyer, there's a bracket here, 9 bracket. So that means he can either shoot 5 dice to both sides, or to each side. So he can shoot 5 this way or 5 that way. Or he can combine both 5 forward, and he can shoot 9 dice to the front. So what am I going to do? Am I going to shoot the Neutron laser or the Neutron Cruiser with 5 dice, or am I going to shoot the Mon Cal with 9? And we'll decide. We'll say he's going to use the 9 dice. So we got 3, 6, 7, 8, 9 dice here. We're going to shoot the Mon Cal Cruiser with 9 dice, hitting on 3s. Let's just say before modifiers. So there's 1, 2. There's 2 misses. So that is 7 hits. Very powerful. Now the Mon Cal Cruiser has to save on that. But because, if you remember, the Imperials were saving on 5s, but the Mon Cal is going to be saving on 4s. All the Mon Cal Cruisers have better shields. So we need 4s or more. So there's 1, 2. No, that's bad. We only saved 2. And now the Imperial player gets to attack the hull with the remaining shots of the Liberty Cruiser, which is 4s. Very well built ships. So 1s, 2s, or 3s will do damage to the ship. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. The hull only saved 1 shot. So 4 damage went through the Mon Cal Cruiser, the Liberty, and back to the chart, 7 hull points. Now, 7 hull points, taking 4 damage, that leaves me with 3. So with a red dice, put that there. Essentially what's happened, Star Destroyers come in and it just pummeled this cruiser. But it had to leave the Neutron Cruiser alone. It couldn't attack it. Whereas the Mon Cal had its choice. It could shoot both. So that just gives you an idea of what that means. Now, if we take that cruiser away, let's say he's dead, and we bring in the Corvette. Now, the Corvette, it's not a very powerful ship when you're thinking of things like assault frigates, neutron cruisers, Star Destroyers, Mon Cals, but it does have a neat ability. Apart from it being extremely fast and extremely hard to hit, the CR-90, 14 inches, it's one of the fastest ships in the game. It can turn 3 times. Now it has a 1 in brackets at the front and a 1 in brackets at the rear. It can shoot to the left or right, 1 each, so it can shoot the strike cruiser or the Star Destroyer, or it can shoot 1 shot either in its front arc or its rear arc. So essentially you're going to get either a broadside of 1 each, or 1 to the front and 1 to the back. And that's just because of the little turrets on front that kind of turn. And it's really good for, like, when let's say you're coming along and your speed gets you to here, and you want to take a little pot shot at this strike cruiser. Now, in the game that we played, I used this ship to great effect. It's probably the best ship in the game for the Rebels. It just kind of flew around and was taking out all of the ships that were left on one hull point, or one health. It would just come flying around, sit there, pew, blow it up, take off again. Really effective. But when it does get shot, let's say the strike cruiser is here, so we'll just do another attack. The strike cruiser, which is down here, it has 1 attack front, 2 attacks to the side. Now, peg to peg, you measure like this. So you measure from the peg that way. So he's in the side arc. We're going to get 2 shots. Hit on 3s. Wow, I'm terrible today. Let's just say both hit. There's 2 hits. The CR90, in this game, it's got a 6+ shield and a 6+ hull. So it needs 6s to save these shots. Doesn't get any. Now, the Imperial player only needs to roll a 6 or less. A 5 or less on the dice to damage him. Boom, there's 2 5s or less. Barely added up to 5. If we go back, the CR90 has only 1 hull point, which means although it's really fast, if it does get hit, it explodes really quickly. Another thing in the game that we didn't probably explain in the battle report is that, let's say, for instance, you get the Star Destroyer and he is destroyed. Just put that there. We have a Rebel cruiser coming in here, and he's going to be firing at this Tartan cruiser here. Let me just do a better job of displaying this for the camera. This is all very ad hoc, and I'm not feeling well, so sorry about that. So let's say the Mon Cal ship comes in, and it wants to shoot this Tartan cruiser. But on the same turn, previous in this turn, the Star Destroyer was destroyed. It was dead. It remains on the table until the beginning of next turn. So the Mon Cal cruiser comes in, and it wants to shoot at this Tartan cruiser. Now, because there's a wreck in the way, there's modifiers to hit. Well, not really modifiers, I would say. There's like a limit to what you can see. And in our game, a ship can only shoot at a target if there's nothing in between that is 3 sizes bigger than it, 3 scales up from it. So if you see here, again, the scale value, and the scale value affects how easy or difficult it is to hit a ship to begin with. So you'll see that the Star Destroyer, if we go here, it's scale 4. The Tartan cruiser is scale 1. So 3 scales bigger, which means that the MC-80 Liberty cannot shoot the Tartan because he's basically hiding behind the hull, the wreckage of the Star Destroyer. Now, if that Star Destroyer wasn't so big, let's say it was, we'll just put this Carrack cruiser here, he's really on fire. We'll put that Carrack cruiser there. Because the Carrack cruiser is only scale 3, I believe. Scale Carrack. He's scale 3. He's not 3 scales bigger than the 1. So scale 4 would block his shot and his shot. But because it's scale 3, you can shoot no problem. And that is just to make sure that, if you have some of the much bigger ships in the game, you don't have them having no effect on the game. So that is line of sight. So we've done movement, shooting, turning, line of sight. I did the fighters, how you assemble your fighter wings in the previous video. And really, what else do we have? We've created some quick reference sheets. So if we can look at this for a second, we have the ranges. So I know it's weird to have like 0.01 or 2.01, but that's just to make it easier that if you're at 2 inches, it's just easier than saying more than 2 inches or 2 inches or less. I just put 0.01 there so everyone understands. And these are the hit modifiers. The closer you are, the easier it is to hit. Then you have the target modifiers. How fast is the target moving? So if the ship is stopped, it's +2 to hit. So you can imagine, like if you're shooting at a 3 and a +2 to hit is a 1, you're hitting on 1s. Although in this game, all natural 1s are misses no matter what. But anyway, you're hitting on 2 pluses if they're stopped. If they're going half or less than their speed, so if they're crippled, for instance, they're +1 to hit as well. They're a little easier. If they're cruising speed, which means more than half but not over 14, there's no negative modifier. And if they're going really fast, it's -1, which is very few ships, mainly just a small ship. So I go back here. Sorry for this. Camera shaking. Bloody hell. There's only a few ships. So there's the Consular class transport, the CR-90 and the CR-69. Along with on the Imperial side, you have what? You've got really nobody. Nobody can go faster than that. So there you go. That's -1. So you have the range modifiers, the target modifiers, and then you have the scale modifiers. Now, scale, it goes from 1 to 6. You can have 7, but I didn't put it on here. And this is just scale tiny, scale 1, small, scale 2, and so on. Extremis, scale 6. And then the 2-hit modifier, no matter if you're stopped or not, or moving or not, you get negatives or positives. So an extreme, so a Super Star Destroyer is extreme, +3 to hit. Doesn't matter, you're basically going to be hitting it anyway, and that would make sense. It's so huge. But something like a CR-69 or a CR-90, they're moving really fast, so -1. They're small or tiny, -1 or 2. They're a little bit more difficult. And then we have on here, we have the line of sight modifiers. This is just explaining to you that you can only attack a ship if there's nothing blocking its 3 scales above the attacker or the target, like I explained, like shooting through something. Then the order of removal is just important here. I know it seems a little redundant, bombers first, then fighters, but if you ever get into a case where there's a multiple combat going on, let's say this E-Wing, this interceptor, and this bomber, let's say there's 1 casualty each. The Rebels take 1 and the Imperials take 1. Well, the Rebels have to take their fighter, and the Imperials have to. They have no choice. They have to take the bomber. It would just make sense that the bomber would get destroyed before the fighter. And then it stops that kind of cherry picking. But anyway, here we go. This is what's next. Then we have the list of fighters and their speed in inches, their dogfight ability, which means how good they are at shooting down things, their bomb rating, which means are they carrying a payload of any kind, and can they damage a capital ship. So you'll see here a B-Wing has 3 rating for bombs, which means he gets 3 attack dice when he's attacking a ship. And when bombers are attacking the ship, there is no shield or armor saves. These missiles or these torpedoes from these bombers are going straight. They're straight damage. And how damage is worked out, you hit on 3s normally, and then you use the target size. So if it's tiny, it'll be 5s, and if it's extreme, it's 6s, or I guess 1s to hit. So if a Y-Wing or whatever, let's say this TIE bomber is coming in, and you have 2 different types of ships to attack, well, which ship am I going to attack? The TIE bomber, he gets 2 dice in attack, so 2 bombs he's going to shoot. If I target the Mon Cal, I'm hitting on, let's see here, scale of the Mon Cal is scale 3, I believe. Let's just do this for you so I can show you. Sorry about this, I'm very confused. The Mon Cal 75, or MC Liberty, he is scale, well, it shouldn't be scale 6, that's a typo. He is scale 4, so he's a large target. There's my first error I spotted. A good thing I did this. He is a large target. He is +1 to that. So instead of hitting the Mon Cal on 3s, he's going to be hitting the Mon Cal on 2s. Now, provided he's not shot down. So you can see, like, bomber getting in on this target, hitting on 2s, there's 2 direct damage to that cruiser. But if that cruiser wasn't there, and he was going to shoot this tiny Corvette, he's now shooting on -2. So instead of hitting on 3s, he's now hitting on 5s. So although he's still got a good chance of getting a 5 there, boom, 1 damage, it's gone. But let's say he didn't get that. The CR-90 survives. So that's how bombing runs are done. So that's these stats here, bombing and dogfighting. And then the hit points is how many damage they can take before you have to remove the stand. So for instance, a K-Wing has 3 hull points. He's very, very strong. an A-Wing, a Y-Wing, the TIE fighters, mainly the Interceptor and the TIE fighter, and the Z95. They're dead when you shoot them, when they take a damage. And then this is just the turn order, telling you who you do initiative, you do the player one activates the ship, you do all these bits with the ship, then you repeat until every ship is activated, and then you do the fighter phase, and you do this list of stuff for every fighter. Now, there was one more thing I wanted to discuss before I go here. We're almost done, about point defense. Point defense is important in this game because it stops fighters and bombers from having it their own way all the time. It would be very easy for fighters and bombers to just float around and do unlimited damage. Now, in reality, they'd have a strict amount of munitions on board that they would be able to launch, as in bombs. But in this game, there is no such restriction. They can shoot every turn they're around. They can bomb every turn that they're around. Now, to mitigate that, there is certain things on ships that can help them defend themselves against fighters or bombers. And that is this point defense value. Now, most big ships have a point defense value of 1, and some small ships have point defense value of, the Executor has 4 point defense, but he's huge. But some of the small ships, for instance, the Tartan, he has a point defense value of 1. Same with the CR90. So if we do this guy here, and then we have Lancer Frigate for the Imperials. The Lancer Frigate has 2 point defense, and these both have 1. Now, in the game themselves, what is a Lancer Frigate going to do against a Mon Cal cruiser? Probably not a whole lot. So players wouldn't really bring them on the table. If you have a choice, you're probably not going to bring it. You're going to bring something that can actually do damage. But what you could do is, let's say you wanted to bring a Star Destroyer. For instance, here, you want to bring a Star Destroyer, but you know that the Rebel player is just gonna follow it around like a mosquito and bomb it every turn. Since there's no shield saves, no hull saves, it'd just be too tempting of a target. And if you're the Rebel player, that would be a good strategy to go after the Star Destroyer. Now, the Imperial player has options. He can have point defense support ships. Now, in the stats, some of the ships have this point defense support ship right here. So this ship right here, the Consular Transport, has point defense support ship and weak guns. Weak guns means it cannot bother any ship scale 3 or higher. It can shoot down corvettes, it can damage some frigates, but cruisers, heavy cruisers, dreadnoughts, it's tickling them. It's not really damaging them. And some ships have just point defense support as a trait. Now, point defense support means that even though this Tartan patrol cutter only has a point defense value of 1, if he is escorting a ship, he now adds his point defense score to the Star Destroyer. So the Star Destroyer, let's go back to the chart. I'm going to go back here several times. Star Destroyers have point defense values of 2. So the Star Destroyer will get 2 chances to shoot down incoming bombers or fighters, whatever it is. The Tartan patrol cruiser has 1. So now that dice pool goes from 2 to 3. But because he's in escort duty, as in base to base, he sacrifices his ability to, move out on his own and attack other ships. He sacrifices that ability and he doubles his point defense. So now you go from you get the 2 from the Star Destroyer, and now the 1 times 2, or the 1 plus 1 from the Tartan, and you have a dice pool of 4 dice. Now, to shoot down a bomber, you have to roll 5s. There has to be a limit. So I think doubling the amount of dice versus making it 4s is better. So Imperial player rolls his dice, gets 1 6+, so he does 1 damage to those X-Wings. Now, this prevents the X-Wings can't actually even target the Tartan. They can only target the escorted ship. This, in essence, stops the Rebel player or the Imperial player from just using their fighters or bombers to fly around all game, chasing down the Star Destroyer and whittling him down turn after turn after turn. But it's very important to the game. It also gives these little ships, like the Lancer, for instance, it gives these little ships a purpose in the game. And that was very important to me. Why would I want to play with a, you're an Imperial player, I want to play with all the Star Destroyers. Well, you know what? I know in the movies, there's all you see in the Return of the Jedi is basically Star Destroyers, but in reality, in the lore, they have all these little tiny ships. And this gives them a usefulness. And that's basically it. I know I went on for 35 minutes, and I'm sure no one's going to really watch this video for 35 minutes, but if you are interested in these rules, I am going to make them available for free. On my blog eventually. I do have a blog. I haven't posted it yet, but I'm going to make it available for free. I might even post it a link to a online drive eventually, once it's been play tested a few more times. I've played it around 10-12 times. My wife has played it with me about 4 more times, and I have my buddy Ben and David. They're going to be playing it quite a few times just to iron out some of the creases. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support. I'm over 800 subscribers, which is mind-blowing. For all you historical fans out there, I am going back to historicals. Don't worry, I've got tons of stuff in the pipeline for that. But for now, I'm just going to be focusing on this set of rules. And sci-fi will come to an end. Probably in the next couple of videos. I'm going to go back to some Napoleonics. And I'm actually getting into Sharp's practice 7 Years' War, Austrians and Prussians. So I have them on the printer right now. They're just in the little UV dryer. They're drying. And that'll be my next big thing. 7 Years' War, 28 mil. 7 Years' War, Austrians and Prussians. I've always wanted to do it, and I'm going to do it in the next couple of months. Anyway, thanks for your support. Sorry about my voice not feeling well. Sorry about the length of the video. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.